Bill Nye the Science Guy. Brought to you by air. Without air, you ain't flying. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Brought to you by molten lava. It's hot, it's rock, but it doesn't roll. Presents Bill Nye the Science Guy. Brought to you by boats. Boats float. Thank you. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by Matter. Matter is everything and all stuff. Stand by for Matter. Shh. Sound. The audience is listening. Bill Nye the Science Guy. Brought to you by Garbage. Garbage. It's what you don't need now. Reduce it. Reuse it. Recycle it. Brought to you by the 3 R's. Brought to you by the Tension and Compression Company, makers of fine structures everywhere. Brought to you by Color and Light. Brought to you by electrons, making your world a brighter place. Brought to you by those round, squishy things in your head. Brought to you by wind. It'll blow you away. For the blood and circulation. Brought to your brains by arteries. Taken away by veins.
Brought to you by chemical reactions. They're a blast.
Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by socks. Socks stick together. Brought to you by reflection. Without it, you couldn't see yourself. Brought to you by bones. Without them, you wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Bones and muscles available in fine animals everywhere. Brought to you by salt and by water. Salt, saltwater are wholly owned subsidiaries of the Ocean Group, including the Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Arctic, and Antarctic. Trademarks of Earth Incorporated. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by heat, because without heat, you'd be cold. Brought to you by insects, a part of your world for over 400 million years. Brought to you by big poles, helping people keep their balance when they need it most. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by the brain. Without it, you wouldn't be able to understand what I'm saying. And that wouldn't be any good for either of us. Now would it? Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by forests. You know, the place where that car freshener smell comes from. Brought to you by communication. Need we say more? Brought to you by seatbelts, transferring your momentum since 1965. Brought to you by reptiles. Brought to you by the ozone layer. We block out ultraviolet light so you don't have to. When you have a need to breathe, respire, and you won't expire. Brought to you by a grant from the Copernicus Foundation, putting the Earth in its place since 1543. Brought to you by Pressure! Ah!
Hi, friends. LG here. You want to talk about selection? We got it all here. You want something green? Take a look at this. Huh? This baby's nicer than my own lawn at home. And it is loaded. It's been completely reseeded. It's filled with chlorophyll. And there are no moles, no mushrooms, no dandelions. This baby is ready to mow.
Brought to you by plants. They're nothing to sneeze at. Brought to you by rocks. Brought to you by Invigoratees, energy for champions. Brought to you by water, getting things wet for over 3 billion years. Brought to you by rubbing. Try rubbing something today. Brought to you by cooties. There's probably some on you right now.
Do you realize that you and I are covered with germs, especially our hands? See, germs are everywhere.
Brought to you by Echo, bouncing sound waves anytime you call. Brought to you by Plankton, the most abundant life form on Earth. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by The Adventures of Adventure Bill. When you seek adventure, watch Adventure Bill. This week on Adventure Bill, they're big, they're hairy, they're warm-blooded, mammals.
Oh, yeah. These are mammals, all right.
Coming up on Adventure. Brought to you by Tops. For winning in spinning, Tops are tops. Brought to you by Fish Sticks. Eat more fish sticks. Brought to you by The Foot. Moving people around for over 4 million years. Brought to you by Mr. Swampy Water Filter. When you need to filter water, try Mr. Swampy. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by Heather's
House of Feathers. Next time you need feathers, call Heather's House of Feathers.
We've got lots of fresh feathers, frozen feathers, fluffy feathers, fuzzy feathers, fancy feathers. Thank you very much.
Take two.
Brought to you by new improved Populax. For those times when you feel overpopulated.
Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by feet. Moving animals for a really long time.
Brought to you by Sammy's Spawn Hut. Sammy's, located upstream past the big rock left of the old log on the right bank. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by Eat Inc., consuming the competition since 1986. Brought to you by Gooey Duck. Marine mammals love to eat them. Brought to you by Silk. It does a spider good. Got silk? Brought to you by Fossil Fuel Petroleum.
Get some while supplies last.
Brought to you by Co-Winky Dink, Inc., the probability people. Brought to you by the all-new Alien Autopsy Doll from Hoaxco. Brought to you by Lasco Premium Crushed Berry Cave Paint, fortified with bone meal. Lasts for eons. Brought to you by the Warbling Wolverines, featuring Don't Take My Heart, 'cause you'll just rip it in two. Volcano! 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 The Science Guy. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by the law offices of Magma, Lava, Tephra, and Pumice, making mountains out of vent holes for over 4 billion years. Brought to you by Tex Nematodes Roundworm Roundup, the Dude Ranch for blood-sucking invertebrates. Bill Nye the Science Guy is brought to you by the hip new beats of cardio and the
You have muscles.
Brought to you by the television. If it hadn't been invented, doing something else right now. Brought to you by Old Stuff Incorporated. You'll dig it. Brought to you by the Big Bang, recognized around the universe as the beginning of time. Brought to you by Little Sisters Security System. When you want to know who's been messing with your stuff, call Little Sisters Security System. Catching Little Sisters red-handed since 1979.
Maybe it's this button.
By Armstrong Moon Boots, with the patented lunar springy step insole. Brought to you by the Double Helix Corporation. We build foundations for life. Brought to you by Broadside Architects. We design and build the broadest barns in the world. Guaranteed. Brought to you by Moldy Bread. Everybody loves moldy bread. Brought to you by the Do-It-Yourself Science Kit. Simple experiments you can do at home. New from DIY Sci. Brought to you by Elements. Building your world one atom at a time. Brought to you by Pond Scum. Making oxygen for over 3 billion years.
Now available in extra light green.
Brought to you by Stalactite Interior Designs. Fine crafts for your home, lovingly created the old-fashioned way. One drip at a time. Brought to you by UFS, the United Fluid System, delivering ocean currents and weather patterns all over the globe. Brought to you by Erosion Demolition, Inc. Give us the time and we'll wear away anything you got. Welcome back to Measuring for Dollars. Brought to you by Baby 04. Brought to you by the Incorporated Corporation of Repetition Incorporated. We give you the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Brought to you by Pushy People. When you need to get something moving, call Pushy People.